The 1970s was a decade of profound transition and upheaval that reshaped global politics, economics, and culture. Following the revolutionary spirit of the 1960s, the 1970s represented a period where many idealistic movements confronted harsh realities. The decade witnessed the conclusion of the Vietnam War, multiple energy crises, significant political scandals, and cultural transformations that permanently altered society. This history captures the headline events that defined each year of this pivotal decade. Apollo 13 drama captivates the world. In April 1970, the Apollo 13 mission turned from routine space exploration to a dramatic fight for survival when an oxygen tank exploded en route to the moon. The world watched anxiously as NASA engineers and astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes worked together to return safely to Earth, culminating in what NASA later called a successful failure. Kent State massacre shocks America. On May 4, 1970, National Guard troops opened fire on student protesters at Kent State University in Ohio, killing 4 students and wounding 9 others. The shootings sparked nationwide student strikes and intensified anti-war sentiment across America. The Beatles officially disbanded. The defining musical group of the 1960s officially broke up when Paul McCartney announced his departure in April 1970, marking the end of an era in popular music and culture. The gold standard ends. In what became known as the Nixon shock, President Richard Nixon announced on August 15th that the United States would end the convertibility of the dollar to gold, effectively terminating the Bretton Woods system of international financial exchange that had governed the global economy since World War II. Pentagon Papers reveal Vietnam War deception. The New York Times began publishing the Pentagon Papers in June, a classified Department of Defense study leaked by Daniel Ellsberg that revealed the U.S. government had systematically lied about the Vietnam War. The Supreme Court's decision to allow publication became a landmark for press freedom. China joins the UN. In a major diplomatic shift, the People's Republic of China was admitted to the United Nations on October 25th, replacing Taiwan and signaling China's emergence as a global power. Nixon's historic visit to China. President Nixon's February visit to the People's Republic of China ended 25 years of diplomatic isolation between the two countries and dramatically changed the landscape of international relations during the Cold War. On June 17th, 5 men were arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. Initially appearing as a minor political scandal, this event would eventually lead to the first presidential resignation in American history. Munich Olympics massacre. The Summer Olympics in Munich turned tragic when Palestinian terrorists took 11 Israeli athletes hostage on September 5th. The botched rescue attempt resulted in the deaths of all hostages, 5 terrorists and 1 police officer, bringing international terrorism into the global spotlight. Vietnam War officially ends for America. The Paris Peace Accords were signed on January 27th, officially ending direct U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. The last American troops left Vietnam on March 29th, concluding America's longest and most divisive foreign conflict to that point. Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision. On January 22nd, the Supreme Court handed down its landmark decision in Roe v. Wade, establishing a woman's constitutional right to abortion and changing the landscape of American politics for decades to come. In response to U.S. support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War, OPEC countries imposed an oil embargo that quadrupled prices and led to fuel shortages across America. Long lines at gas stations became a powerful symbol of America's newfound vulnerability and economic uncertainty. Nixon resigns the presidency. As the Watergate scandal intensified with mounting evidence of obstruction of justice, Richard Nixon became the first U.S. president to resign from office on August 9th, declaring, "I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow."
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Global recession deepens. The oil crisis triggered a severe global recession characterized by the painful combination of stagnant economic growth and high inflation. Stagflation that defied conventional economic solutions and shattered the post-war economic boom. India joins the nuclear club. India conducted its first nuclear test, codenamed Smiling Buddha, on May 18th, becoming the world's sixth nuclear power, and raising concerns about nuclear proliferation beyond the superpowers. Fall of Saigon ends. Vietnam War North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon on April 30th, culminating in dramatic helicopter evacuations from the U.S. Embassy. The fall of South Vietnam marked the complete end of the Vietnam War and a humiliating defeat for American foreign policy. Apollo-Soyuz Test Project. At the height of détente, American astronauts and Soviet cosmonauts docked their spacecraft together in orbit on July 17th, symbolizing a thawing in Cold War tensions and cooperation in space. The Thrilla in Manila. Muhammad Ali defeated Joe Frazier in their third and final boxing match on October 1st in the Philippines, concluding one of the greatest sporting rivalries in history and cementing Ali's legendary status. United States celebrates bicentennial. Amid economic troubles and post-Watergate cynicism, Americans celebrated the nation's 200th birthday on July 4th, with elaborate festivities across the country, temporarily healing some of the divisions of the previous decade. Jimmy Carter elected president, former Georgia Governor Jimmy Carter, running as an outsider promising to restore trust in government after Watergate, defeated incumbent Gerald Ford in the presidential election, ending 8 years of Republican control of the White House. Viking 1 lands on Mars. On July 20th, NASA's Viking 1 became the first spacecraft to successfully land on Mars and perform its mission, sending back unprecedented images of the Martian surface and conducting experiments to search for life. Star Wars changes cinema forever. George Lucas's space epic Star Wars premiered on May 25th, breaking box office records, revolutionizing special effects, and launching one of the most successful entertainment franchises in history. Egyptian President Sadat visits Israel. In a stunning diplomatic breakthrough, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat made a historic visit to Israel on November 19th, becoming the first Arab leader to officially visit the Jewish state and paving the way for the Camp David Accords. Elvis Presley dies. On August 16th, the king of rock and roll was found dead at his Graceland mansion at age 42, triggering worldwide mourning and elevating Elvis to mythical status in American culture. Camp David Accords. After intense negotiations facilitated by President Carter, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin signed the Camp David Accords on September 17th, establishing a framework for peace in the Middle East. 3 popes in 1 year, 1978, saw the deaths of Pope Paul VI and Pope John Paul I, who reigned for only 33 days, and the election of Polish Cardinal Karol Wojtyła as Pope John Paul II, the first non-Italian pope in 455 years, and a major figure in the eventual fall of communism. Mass suicide at Jonestown. On November 18th, over 900 members of the People's Temple cult, led by Jim Jones, committed mass suicide by drinking cyanide-laced punch in Jonestown, Guyana, shocking the world and raising concerns about cult influence. Iranian Revolution overthrows. The Shah Islamic revolutionaries, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, overthrew the U.S.-backed Shah of Iran in February, establishing an Islamic republic that dramatically altered Middle Eastern geopolitics and U.S. foreign policy for decades to come. 3 Mile Island nuclear accident. A partial meltdown at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania on March 28th caused widespread panic, galvanized the anti-nuclear movement, and effectively halted new nuclear power plant construction in the United States. Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. On December 24th, Soviet forces invaded Afghanistan to prop up a communist government, beginning a 9-year conflict that would become Russia's Vietnam and marking the end of détente between the superpowers. Iran hostage crisis begins. On November 4th, Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 52 Americans hostage in retaliation for U.S. support of the deposed Shah. The crisis would last 444 days, dominate the final year of Carter's presidency, and fundamentally reshape American-Iranian relations. The 1970s closed with Americans held hostage in Iran, Soviet tanks rolling into Afghanistan, and economic uncertainty at home, a fitting end to a decade characterized by disillusionment, crisis, and transition. Yet the decade also saw remarkable achievements: peace between Egypt and Israel, breakthroughs in space exploration, and cultural innovations that continue to resonate. The 1970s transformed America from a confident superpower to a nation confronting its limitations, both at home and abroad. The decade's legacies, environmentalism, feminism, economic restructuring, and a more complex view of America's role in the world, continue to shape our politics and culture today. As the 1980s dawned, America would respond to the challenges of the 1970s with renewed conservatism, heightened Cold War tensions, and economic policies that would define the coming decade.